Everyone lies when they say everything is fine. No one wakes up at 7 in the morning, chugs cold coffee, and faces 2 hours of traffic out of love for life. You know it.
Most people don't live, they endure. Have you noticed how busy everyone seems to be so they don't have to think? How they distract themselves with anything? Notifications, gossip, debt, shows they don't love, relationships they barely tolerate. It's because stopping is dangerous. Stopping means thinking. And thinking means confronting the question you've avoided since childhood. Why does all this exist, if it's going to end anyway? Peter Wessel Zapffe, one of the most radical philosophers of the 20th century, gave the answer no one wants to hear. Consciousness is a flaw, a mistake of nature. We are the only animal that knows it will die, and yet we are forced to live as if that didn't destroy us inside. Don't you feel that all the time? An emptiness that appears on Sunday night, when the music stops, when the feed isn't distracting, when the room darkens and the silence weighs. The truth is unbearable. That's why we invent lies elegant, useful, even beautiful, but they are lies. You call them purpose, faith, hope. Zapffe called them defenses against reality. And there are four mechanisms that human beings created, not to find the truth, but to avoid going insane facing it. You use these defenses every day, and in this video, you will discover how and why. But be warned, you won't like what you're about to see, because once you realize that your life might be a well-constructed illusion, there's no turning back. Let's begin. Every child discovers death before the age of 7, and almost all of them stop asking about it after 8. Not because they understood it, but because they realized that no one wants to talk about it. It's as if, at some point, everyone signed an invisible contract. We don't talk about what scares us. This is the first defense mechanism against reality, according to Peter Wessel Zapffe. Isolation, often referred to as repression or denial in his context. But it's not just about denying facts. It's about amputating pieces of consciousness so that life seems bearable. The human being, upon becoming aware of their own existence, is thrown into an abyss. Isolation is the rope ladder that pretends to be attached to some edge. The pact of isolation is everywhere, in the superficiality of conversations, in ready-made advice, in the normalization of daily suffering. How many times have you seen someone ask, "Are you okay?" and accept a simple yes as an answer, even with the other person's eyes pleading for help? How many times have you been that person? We isolate ourselves from death, pain, emptiness, the absurd. We even isolate ourselves from the act of isolation itself, because admitting this would be tearing the varnish that covers our entire society. We are trained not to think, to smile while we sink. But isolation is not innocent. It is functional. Zapffe saw it with brutal clarity. He said that the human being developed a degree of consciousness that nature did not design to withstand. We are, in his words, a failed experiment of evolution. That's why we need to isolate, not as a choice, but as a mechanism for psychic survival. Look at hospitals, for example. In many cultures, doctors still hide the severity of the diagnosis from terminal patients. They say it's for their own good. In reality, it's so that the pact of isolation isn't broken, because a single, overly conscious look can contaminate everyone around them. And so we continue, isolating ourselves from instability, chance, inevitable pain, inevitable failure. We put comfortable words over tragedy. We call it a challenge. We call it a lesson. But it's just the old mechanism operating. Don't talk, don't think, don't feel, or the abyss will swallow you. Only the abyss is there. It always has been. And those who dare to look at it without filters, without anesthesia, run the risk of understanding too much. And then, as Zapffe said, to understand is to suffer. You don't know the name of the child who died yesterday of starvation. And, deep down, you prefer not to know, because if you did, you would have to feel something. And feeling something true can dismantle everything you have built to stay standing. The world is falling apart, but your routine bubble remains intact. Coffee with sugar, emails, repeated jokes on WhatsApp, the same commute to work, the same excuse for not thinking too much. You call this an organized life. Zapffe called it existential isolation. Man isolates disturbing experiences, locking them away in psychic compartments, as if storing poison in labeled jars. Do not open. It is an unconscious and necessary choice. If our consciousness were completely open to all the pain, injustice, disorder, and absurdity that exist in the world, we would collapse. That's why you don't see. Not because you are blind, but because you learned not to look. Isolation works like software running in the background. It filters, selects, cuts, silences. It keeps the horror far enough away to keep functioning, like a refrigerator full of rotten meat that no one dares to open because the smell would ruin everything. Society reinforces this system. It rewards those who keep their eyes on what is relevant: productivity, goals, emotional stability. But what is emotionally stable in a world that collapses daily? Syrian children under rubble, elderly people dying alone in nursing homes, animals being ground alive for feed. This is happening now, but your brain can't bear to know it. So you do what everyone does: compartmentalize, shut down, block. And here's the inescapable point. Isolation is not just an individual strategy, it is cultural, collective, and institutionalized. That's why you can go months without hearing about the war in Sudan, but you don't miss an update on a celebrity fight. The information exists, but you learn to avoid it because touching true reality is risky. It's like touching a live wire. You feel everything at once, and for an instant, you understand too much. The excess of lucidity paralyzes, Zapffe wrote, and that's why humanity protects itself with mental bubbles. Only these bubbles are not fortresses. They are prisons, made of distraction, superficiality, comfortable silence. You are surrounded and believe you are safe, but safety and blindness are different things. You just have to decide what you prefer to remain, protected or conscious. You believe in something you did not choose. You believe you love your homeland, but you were not the one who designed the flag. You defend a religion, but it came to you through geography, not enlightenment. You call this conviction, but it is heritage, conditioning, cultural vice. It is your anchor, and it does not serve to show you the truth. It serves to prevent you from sinking. Peter Wessel Zapffe was direct. Anchoring is attributing meaning where there is none. It is transforming chaos into narrative, even if it is a necessary lie. The human being cannot bear the void. It cannot bear knowing that it is floating in an indifferent universe, without an instruction manual, without a guarantee of justice, without a reward at the end. So, it creates roots in myths, symbols, stories. It clings to the idea of family, nation, God, legacy. Not because these things are real in themselves, but because without them, everything seems unbearably random. The problem? These anchors become ideological prisons. You live to be a good father, a good wife, an exemplary citizen, because you were taught that is noble. But have you considered whether those roles free you or consume you? There are soldiers who die without understanding the cause they defend. There are parents who suffocate their children trying to repeat inherited models. There are religious people who hate in the name of love. It's not about attacking values. It's about asking where they came from. Who benefits from your obedience? Anchoring is that, accepting a ready-made meaning, stopping thinking where one should question the most. The truth is free, but man chooses the cage, as long as it has a beautiful name. Zapffe saw this eagerness to cling to meanings as a reflection of existential panic. We are not rational beings. We are terrified beings trying to maintain composure. And in that desperation, any story will do, as long as it protects us from the vertigo of not knowing why we are here. Even science becomes an anchor when used as blind belief. Even love becomes an anchor when it serves to justify attachment and fear. You don't need to believe in anything to be free. But freedom is scary, because it offers no promises. That's why most will continue to believe in flags, in shields, in scriptures. Not because they are absolute truths, but because they are crutches that prevent them from falling. And that's fine, until you realize you are walking in circles, trapped in an anchor that was never yours. Every masterpiece is, above all, a scream that no one managed to stifle. What we call art almost always begins with anguish, and what we call beauty is often just pain transformed into a showcase so as not to kill the one who feels it. Peter Wessel Zapffe said that the human being unable to destroy suffering, tries to transform it into language. Man sublimates his tragedy, turning it into expression, art, theory. This does not save him, but it entertains him. Entertainment is essential here, because sublimation does not cure, it only reorganizes suffering into bearable forms. The shattered poet writes verses about absence. The musician with suicidal tendencies composes anthems of hope, not because they are well, but because it's that or eternal silence. It's that or the end. You admire artists like Van Gogh, Sylvia Plath, Kurt Cobain, but you forget that they were bleeding while they created, and the world applauded them, only after it was too late to save them. They sublimated, but they were not saved. Sublimating is postponing the collapse, not preventing it. Sublimation is the most intelligent mechanism because it is the most elaborate. Unlike isolation or anchoring, it deals with the absurd head-on, but clothes it in metaphor. Pain becomes aesthetics, the void becomes philosophy, death becomes discourse, but deep down, it is just chaos framed. Zapffe saw this with brutal clarity. Even the great philosophical systems, the most complex ideologies, the deepest works, are just human constructions to make life seem like more than a tragic mistake. And they are. But they are still constructions. Modern science suggests that the human brain is biologically predisposed to find patterns where there are none. It is an evolutionary strategy. Detecting meaning helps avoid paralysis. Sublimation is that, creating meaning where there was only a scream. You can call it art, religion, love, literature. But deep down, it is just suffering, wanting to be useful, wanting to justify itself, wanting to say, if I suffered, at least let this serve for something. But what if it doesn't? What if beauty is just the makeup of despair? Sublimation allows you to continue, but keeps you trapped. Because even when you transform pain into gold, it is still pain, polished, decorated, sold, but intact. And maybe, deep down, the only truth that remains is this: the human is the only animal that suffers, and yet tries to make poetry out of it. Most people only think seriously about life after losing someone. There is no more honest philosophy than grief. You can study religions, go to therapy, devour self-help books, repeat mantras, but none of that makes sense under a coffin. There is no metaphor, no purpose, no "it will pass." Only silence and the void remain. Peter Wessel Zapffe called this awakened consciousness without escape. Life became conscious of itself and, upon perceiving it, collapsed. Every structure we build, family, career, spirituality, art, exists to distract us from that collapse. But when all those defenses fail, what remains? The truth remains. And the truth is this: there is no guarantee of meaning. None. The universe has no obligation to be fair. Existence does not need to justify itself. You were born because two bodies met, not because you were assigned a cosmic mission. Pain is not a test. Tragedy is not a lesson. Death is not a portal. Those are just pretty words to avoid going insane. Zapffe's proposal was radical and honest. The only truly ethical act is to prevent another conscious being from suffering the same curse. This is the basis of existential antinatalism, not as a gesture of hatred, but as extreme compassion. Not bringing more beings into the world is not a denial of life. It is respect for the weight of it. You can reject this idea. You can say it is radical, nihilistic, pessimistic, but that is the recourse of those who don't want to look straight ahead. Pessimism is not wishing ill. It is recognizing that ill exists and that perhaps it is structural. There is no redemption for consciousness. It is the open wound of the cosmos, Zapffe wrote. And then comes the inevitable question. Is it worth living knowing this? The answer is not universal, but perhaps for the first time, it is sincere. Some will continue to pretend, others will continue to create. Few will simply breathe deeply, accept, and move on, even without answers. But after all this, you can no longer say you didn't know. Now the choice is yours. Return to the lie or bear the weight of reality. If you have made it this far, I need to tell you something with complete honesty. Few people can bear to look at reality without anesthesia. Few have the courage to take off the masks and keep breathing. You not only stayed until the end, you felt, you thought, you allowed yourself to be uncomfortable. And just for that, you are supporting this work in an immense way. Because every person who watches until the end, who shares, who talks about this with someone, helps this message to continue existing in a world where every honest effort for the truth is fragile and needs encouragement. Just by being here, you've already done more than most. You are helping simply by caring. Now, if all this resonated with you, don't let it die here. Comment, share. Make this content break the bubble, because while the lie comforts, it is the truth that liberates. And perhaps that is exactly what we are trying to do together here. Thank you once again for being part of this, and for being here. I'll see you in the next video.